9 experienced hikers entered the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. Their tent was found cut open from the inside. They had fled barefoot into -30-degree temperatures, and when their bodies were finally recovered, the Soviet government sealed the files for 30 years. The files are open now. The answers are not. Welcome back to the Midnight Ledger. Tonight's case file is the most investigated unexplained death in modern history. 60 years of forensic analysis, 2 Russian government investigations, a study published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, and still no agreed explanation for what happened on that mountain. 9 people went in, none came out, and the evidence they left behind has never made sense. Let's open the file. The 23rd of January 1959, 10 students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute set out on a 16-day ski expedition through the northern Ural Mountains. They were experienced. The 8 men and 2 women all had Grade 2 hiker certifications with ski tour experience. This was not a group of beginners. This was the best. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. His goal: to reach the peak of Otorten Mountain, a route that would earn them the Soviet Union's highest mountaineering certification. One hiker, Yuri Yudin, turned back after several days due to a sciatica flare-up. That decision saved his life. The remaining 9 continued. Dyatlov had arranged to send a telegram to his sports club once the group returned. When the club didn't hear from them, by February 20th, a search party set out. What they found on that mountain changed everyone who saw it. On February 26th, the search party found the Dyatlov group's tent. It had been cut in half from the inside. Within the tent were the group's belongings, including their shoes. Outside, 9 sets of footprints made by people wearing only socks, a single shoe, or completely barefoot. 9 people had sliced their tent open from inside, in the dark, in -30 degrees, and run directly into a Siberian winter without their shoes. Something had terrified them so completely that the cold was less frightening than staying. The first 5 bodies were found over the following weeks. All had died from hypothermia, barefoot, underdressed, miles from their tent. Then the snow began to melt. The final 4 bodies were found buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine. These individuals had suffered horrific internal injuries. Thibaut Brignol had a skull fracture so severe there were pieces of bone in his brain. Zolotaryov and Dubinina had crushed chests. The forensic medical examiner concluded that these injuries were the result of a large force approximately equal to that of a high-speed car crash. Surprisingly, there were no major external wounds. Read that again. Injuries equal to a car crash. On the inside, nothing on the outside. No cuts, no bruises, no signs that anything had struck them. Lyudmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, her eyes, part of her lips, and facial tissue. The medical records simply state the tongue is missing. There is no credible explanation for this. Several items of clothing were found to be highly radioactive. In the context of the Cold War, this immediately sparked theories about secret Soviet weapons testing in the Ural Mountains. Soviet investigators could find no plausible explanation. They closed the case, citing an unknown natural force. An unknown natural force. That was the official conclusion of the Soviet government. For 30 years, that was all anyone was allowed to know. The area around the pass was closed for 3 years following the incident. The investigation files were classified. Witnesses were reportedly told not to speak about what they had seen. The case was buried the way the Soviet government buried inconvenient things. Then, in 2019, 60 years later, the Russian government reopened the investigation. The federal Russian investigation in 2019 and another in 2020 concluded that a slab avalanche most likely caused the deaths. Investigators pointed to the tent being pitched on a slope. Snow displaced by the hikers eventually broke loose, sending a sudden wave of snow into the tent in darkness. Panicked, they cut through and ran. The internal injuries, they argued, were caused by the pressure of snow. Investigators and researchers who have spent decades on this case immediately raised questions. The slope angle was too shallow for an avalanche. No avalanche debris was found around the tent. The hikers, experienced mountaineers, had specifically chosen that spot because of its safety, and no avalanche has ever removed a human tongue. Here is what 60 years of investigation has confirmed beyond dispute. 9 experienced hikers cut their tent from the inside and fled barefoot into -30-degree cold. Something made that preferable to staying. 3 of them sustained injuries equivalent to car crashes, with no external wounds to explain how. 1 of them had her tongue, eyes, and facial tissue removed. No explanation has ever been offered. Their clothing tested radioactive. The source has never been definitively confirmed. The internal injuries, including massive chest trauma, fractured skulls, with no corresponding external wounds, is genuinely anomalous and difficult to explain through conventional mechanisms. Such events almost always produce external injuries. The clean nature of the internal damage suggests a force that could penetrate the body without damaging skin and muscle, which is not something natural phenomena typically produce. The Soviet government said, unknown natural force. 60 years later, that remains the most accurate description anyone has managed. The pass through the Ural Mountains where this happened was renamed after Igor Dyatlov, the 2-3-year-old student who led his group in and never came back. Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back, lived until 2013. He spent the rest of his life trying to understand what had happened to his friends. He never found an answer. The declassified Soviet autopsy photographs, the radioactive clothing, the tent cut from the inside, the missing tongue. These are not legends. These are documents. These are physical evidence. These are things that exist in archives and laboratories and can be verified today. And still, no one agrees on what caused them. That is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, the most investigated unexplained death in modern history, and the case file stays open. Subscribe to the Midnight Ledger. New case every week. Tell me in the comments, avalanche, weapons testing, or something else entirely. Until next time, the ledger stays open.